with the aoudad, they're not going away.
Yeah.
They're just not. There's got to be a balance in there somewhere. There's some population studies, some population dynamic studies that have been done, and one of the things that was really opened my eyes when I first read this and went to the lectures and then the researcher was presenting it. In order to maintain the number of aoudad where they currently are, don't increase, don't decrease, but just steady state, stay where they are, you'd have to kill 80-something% of the ewes every year.
Wow.
So they're not going anywhere.
This is the Aptitude Outdoors Podcast, where we interview conservationists, hunters, anglers, and outdoorsmen and women to bring you the greatest stories, information, and advice from the best in the world. I'm a huge fanatic for handmade, high-quality leather and canvas products. In my opinion, they last longer, hold up better to the abuses of travel, and honestly, they just look really cool. That's why I use Badger Claw Outfitters. They've been making handcrafted products for hunting, camping, and travel since 2011, and that's right up my alley. Best part is they're made right here in the USA and are guaranteed for life. They've got everything from gun leather, belts, custom knife sheaths, wallets, duffel bags, leather and canvas pouches, everyday carry items, and more. Badger Claw Outfitters, made in the USA, built for the wild. This episode was recorded live at the 2023 Hunt Fish Podcast Summit, where podcasters and guests from across the country come together to talk about their passions for hunting, fishing, and conservation. This year's summit is brought to you by Waypoint TV, Ron Hoover Marine of Galveston, Spot Stalker Guide Service, the Wild Sheep Foundation, Galveston Fishing Company, Captain Experiences, and Badger Claw Outfitters. Mr. Sam Cunningham, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Warren Ranch, first off, Beautiful Hunt Fish Podcast Summit. And, I hear great things about Texas Bighorn Society. Good friends with Chester Moore. He talks to you guys.
Yeah, he's a big ambassador for us.
Big ambassador, and it's great because bighorns, especially up where I'm from, A, we don't have them. B, they're not really talked about outside of, Western right. hunting and stuff. So for me to learn about them is really awesome. But where did you get involved with Western bighorns and, especially Texas bighorns? I don't even think people know they exist half the time. Well, how did you get passionate about that?
I grew up in a small town up near Amarillo, which is about as far away from sheep country in Texas as you can get and still be in Texas. Grew up hunting and fishing. Grandfather was a big influence in that. Got interested even more so reading the same books I'm sure you read, Jack O'Connor and all of that. Into wildlife, my whole life. Mm-hmm. And then hunting and fishing, of course, throughout the whole time. Got interested in sheep, went on a sheep hunt, actually tried to join the Texas Bighorn Society for 2 years. Uh-huh. This was back when the website at the time was barely a website, and I couldn't get them to take. I couldn't get it to take my money and my credit card. I couldn't register. I was just a mess. So one year I went to the sheep show in Reno, and mm-hmm. when I got to the exhibit hall, I went straight to the TBS booth and signed up right then.
There you go.
And so that's kind of how I got involved with TBS.
Yeah, and what are for the people who might not know, and especially here in Texas, things are done a little differently than a lot of other places, but what are the major issues facing bighorns? I mean, I think everybody that knows about bighorns and sheep knows there's some respiratory issues right. they have, and there's obviously the water issues. Well, in Texas specifically, what are your biggest concerns?
Currently, it's the disease problem. Mm-hmm. We're not immune to that. We're just like every other Western state. It was a little slower getting to Texas, but man, it really showed up when it did. The disease from a lot of the other Western states, theirs is transmitted a lot through proximity with domestic goats, sheep and goats. Mm-hmm. Ours, some extent along the border, along the Rio Grande River, mm-hmm.
But
most of our disease comes from aoudad.
Aoudad, really?
Yes, sir.
So aoudad are interesting animals. I mean, they're cool.
Very much so, yeah.
They're cool.
Fascinating.
They're a little scary. So the first time I ever came to this summit, we were in a different part of Texas. We were on a ranch, and we were turkey hunting. So I'm sitting under this big shaded tree, all my camo on, my face all covered up, and I'm blending in. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this aoudad just blows past me, blasts through the brush down into this little canyon. There was almost some cleanup going on that was my first experience with an aoudad coming from. I was like, what was that thing? So but how are they out competing them? What's the deal with aoudads?
A little bit of all. Yeah, like you said, they're really cool animals. Aoudad are. They're very hardy animals. They could go from grazers to browsers and back, and they eat things that nobody else will eat. So they're really hard on habitat, number one. They're very aggressive animals as far as when it comes to taking over a water spot or something like that. And then with the disease transmission, all of that. They really outcompete bighorns. It's not even close.
Wow.
They've got a lot of different advantages. Like I said, some of that grazers to browsers and back, so they can utilize habitat like the sheep can't. They have a big reproductive advantage as well. Their aoudad are able to reproduce at 9 months of age. The ewes can, and a lot of times they'll breed twice a year, and most of those times they have twins. So you can kind of see the exponential expansion. It's not a linear one. It goes like that. So they have a big reproductive advantage over the bighorn sheep also.
So the bighorn sheep, are bighorns the only species in Texas?
No. We have down in the area in the Trans-Pecos area where our sheep are. There's also mule deer, pronghorn. Pronghorn are making a bit of a comeback. There were some issues with that for a while, but they're making a comeback. Throughout the state, we also have whitetail, mule deer, other places in the state as well. All the upland game birds.
Texas
waterfowl.
Texas is just interesting because of the diversity of animals, but there's also this weird mix of non-native, native, and they're all running around wild doing their own thing. So one of the questions I like to kind of like ponder over is, how do they justify having all these non-natives out competing something? And I like, from a conservation perspective and a money-making perspective, I suppose that I can see it from like the dollars coming into hunting. There's big money in hunting, especially on private ranches and stuff and leases. But from a bighorn perspective, they're having a hard time. They're struggling. Is that something that like you're conflicted with as well? Because I mean, you grew up in Texas. That's part of your culture and your history and how you live. So,
yeah, I mean, it's part of it. With the aoudad, they're not going away.
Yeah,
they're just not. So there's got to be a balance in there somewhere. There's some population studies, some population dynamic studies that have been done, and one of the things that was really opened my eyes when I first read this and went to the lectures and then researcher was presenting it. In order to maintain the number of aoudad where they currently are, don't increase, don't decrease, but just steady state, stay where they are, you'd have to kill 80-something% of the ewes every year.
Wow.
So they're not going anywhere.
They're not going anywhere. No. So do Texas Bighorns or Bighorns in general have any specific needs, like from where they live? Or are they kind of like, are they fragile in what habitats they can live in, or are they?
Yeah, and there's Lalo Gonzalez at Borderlands Research Institute did a really nice study several years ago talking about that very thing, and kind of going back to the aoudad deals, looked at all the prime sheep habitat and where the sheep did collar studies and where the sheep were, and the aoudad came in and displaced sheep out of the prime sheep habitat into lesser habitat, and the aoudads just sort of took over. That's what I kind of alluded to earlier when I was talking about how aggressive they can be. And so now those sheep are in lesser habitat, so you have all those ramifications from that.
What would an ideal habitat be for a Texas Bighorn?
You have to have slope.
Super steep?
Yes, a lot of slope, cover, food, water, just like everything else, but slope and cover are big.
What are they? Are they big? Do they just kind of eat like the mesquite and stuff laying around, or what is their general food sources?
They'll different bushes and salt cedars and things like that.
So are you like projects you guys are working? Are you doing a lot of the big water tank stuff, or how? Like, because I know Wild Sheep Foundation does a lot of that kind of stuff, but
right.
Is that a big project you're working on? And
that's an ongoing project. Since 2018, I think we've built 38, 40.
That's great.
Water catchments. Every year we have a work project, and we do other things, but typically we'll put 2 guzzlers on the very tops of mountains when we do that as well.
How do those work? I mean, is it just basically a big tank that they can come drink out of, or is it kind of slowly release water? I know about them, but I don't know how they work.
They're pretty cool when the first time you ever see it. Once it's all built, there's what we call the apron, okay, which is a 20 foot by 20 foot. It looks almost like an inverted tin roof. Okay. So the outside's 38 inches, the middle's 35, and then the inside part is 33. Okay. So it's got a slope going in, and there's 2 of those, one on each side. So it's like a V. There's a gutter in the middle. The water runs in, collects that, runs down to a pipe. The pipe splits, and then there's 2 2,500-gallon tanks. And then at the bottom of that, polyline coming off and going to a trough in different directions.
Oh, so it's like almost like a slow trickle, so it doesn't just run out all at once?
Correct. The troughs have valves on them. And so when the water goes down, obviously the valve kicks on, runs down, fills it up, float valve raises and cuts it off.
Kind of sounds like a giant rabbit feeder. Rabbit water tank thing or something.
Kind of, yeah. That's a great way to describe it.
That is pretty cool, though. I mean, how does that benefit anything else beside the bighorn? I mean, overall, like it sounds like that could help any animal lives in the desert.
Anything that's up there will use that. On our website, on the Texas Bighorn Society website, on all those guzzlers, we have trail cameras.
Oh, cool.
That live feed to our website. So you can pick a guzzler and click on it and watch it live, or you can go back and see pictures that it's captured, and you'll find everything.
Everything, yeah. Well, is
birds, mammals, everything.
Well, that's what I love about conservation, especially with hunting and conservation being so intertwined. Is once people that don't hunt they don't understand that concept,
right? And
that's something I learned. I mean, I've only been hunting for 6 years, and I think that learning that really shaped the way I think about hunting now. And I think a lot of people like to think about how hunting, they talk about how we, shoot stuff and it dies, and they have a really hard time with that. But I don't know, it's not even a justification to me. From the logical side point of that is there's organizations like yours out here. Yes, you're very concerned with bighorn sheep.
Right.
But the projects you're doing are benefiting all the animals surrounding. And I just think that is such it's like, what do they call it? Like when they do the drive-through thing and you pass, they're like, I'll pay for the guy, and they just pay it forward. Yeah. Like it's the same concept with wildlife. And I think that's just such a cool concept. I really think that's awesome. And a lot of people just don't understand that. Yeah. And it's really interesting. So when we talk on the hunting side of bighorn, how is that regulated in Texas? Are there very limited tags, or is there hunting's so different down here? So it's hard for me to understand. Right. Is there a season, or is it kind of everybody has an option to buy points? I don't know how it works.
The way it works in Texas is different than most other places for the bighorn sheep, anyway.
Yeah.
Every year, the Parks and Wildlife do surveys and get an idea of the population, and then tags or hunting opportunities are allocated based on those results.
Okay.
There are some state tags that a couple of public draw tags. There's one that goes into what's called the Texas Grand Slam. There's a sheep as part of that. There's another one that's just a desert bighorn sheep draw. Obviously, tons of private land in Texas, and so based on the population of the sheep on your land determines how many tags a landowner will get, and then they can sell those to outfitters, do whatever they want to.
So it's per property that has them?
Per landowner, yeah.
Wow. So how many people actually, I mean, I don't need an exact number. If you just had to like guesstimate, how often, how many people a year are going on sheep hunts in Texas?
10 to 15 probably. Don't quote me on that.
No. I was expecting to say a few hundred, not.
No.
So that's how limited it is.
The one other tag that's really important to our organization, there's also another tag that's referred to as the auction tag. Some people, there's different names. That's usually what it's called. There's one tag. We get that tag to put in our fundraiser to auction off. Next year, Wild Sheep Foundation gets that tag to put in their fundraiser. And then the third year, there's a pool, and then somebody out of that pool gets it. And then we get it, Wild Sheep Foundation, and then a different one out of that pool. So there's that auction tag rotates also that helps raise a lot of money for different conservation organizations.
So one person per year, or so anybody can buy into that.
Yeah, anybody
pool.
can. Yeah.
So it's like
that pool is conservation organizations.
Okay.
That's not necessarily.
Well, I mean, like, is it a bid? Like, what I mean is like, so anybody can purchase the raffle ticket essentially.
Correct. Or bid on it in an auction.
Or bid on it.
Yes.
And you get a ticket every year, and then Wild Sheep Foundation gets a ticket every year.
Well, there's just one.
Oh, there's one ticket.
So we get it 1 year.
Next year
they get it. The third year, one of those other groups gets it. Then, so we get it every third year.
So it's like a 3-year cycle.
Yeah.
That's wild. That is highly regulated.
Yeah.
So that is a very sought after, unique hunt for a lot of people.
Very much so.
So I think that's an interesting model for how to fund that, because funding for wildlife organizations is generally the most difficult part, I would assume, for just like any organization. Right. Any funding is difficult. So that's creating a high demand for a very limited product.
Right.
That's good.
And with the Texas Bighorn Society, whenever we have that tag and we auction it off, 100% of that money goes right back into the sheep program, because we're a complete volunteer organization, so we don't have any overhead like that. It all goes back to the sheep program.
So when we're talking about disease, I know that it's a respiratory disease, and that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge on it. What is the problems the sheep are having once they get this disease? I don't know what it's called. I'm aware of it. So like, what happens to the sheep once they get this?
It's actually a pneumonia complex.
Okay.
So there's more. It's not just one organism. It's a complex of organisms. Kind of the one that seems to be the most critical for that is one called Mycoplasma ovi pneumonia.
Okay.
Or MOV, you might have heard that term thrown out.
Yes.
And that's kind of the one that causes the problems. And so they'll get exposed to it or contracted either from, in western states from domestic sheep or goats or wild sheep that are infected, or in Texas, aoudad. Mm-hmm. And it's usually fatal in wild sheep. Whereas a domestic sheep or goat, they cough a couple times and be over it and go on. Whereas wild sheep, it really hits them.
So has there been any progress over the years in trying to find a solution for this? I mean, obviously you're working on it. It's a very major concern, but where do things stand with that? Because that's like really concerning, because big sheep are a staple. It's like an iconic American wildlife.
Right.
And to have it really makes me sad personally when stuff like this happens. And it's like, well, and a lot of people have all these why don't you just do this? Like they know what they're talking about.
How come you hadn't created a vaccine?
Yeah, like you're not spending millions of dollars trying to figure this out, So where do we stand currently?
Right now, there's no treatment. There's no shots, no vaccines, there's been everything tried, from putting treatment in mineral blocks to treating the water. There's a very similar organism that is in domestic pigs. And so the pork industry has been fighting this for years, and they've sunk a ton of money in it compared to the wildlife side of it, and they still hadn't come up with anything. So,
wow, that's kind of scary.
Yeah, it's a little depressing when you stop and think about it. Yeah,
it is really sad, and it's just, where do we draw the line? I mean, society's growing. Cities are getting bigger, reaching out further and further, and there's always going to be this conflict between humans and wildlife. Right. And it's just, my biggest thing, especially this is the whole reason I do this podcast, is to raise awareness. Like how how do you get people to care more? And then it's like, where does the line of caring and getting a solution come in too? Because like the way I think about it is like, maybe if we get the right person to care, they'll come up with the solution.
Right.
You know, and that's hard to do. Is like, it's hard for people to care about wildlife. It just is, because it's not. Most people don't hunt.
Our organization, that's kind of a multifaceted answer on from our organization. Just right off the top of the bat, we fund wild sheep research and disease transmission from several different universities in the state, people looking at different things. The other thing about how do you get people to care, in our organization, that's one thing we don't lack. We have 840-ish members.
Okay.
The vast majority of which are life members.
That's great.
So they're in there for the long haul. When our organization was started back in the 80s, and the first translocations from Arizona into Texas, that was all our membership paid for. Gene Holloway and his wife and family, they were some of the founding members. He donated trucks, time, fuel, drove to Arizona, picked up sheep. His son Linton is actually one of our board members, and it's kind of fun, kind of cool listening to him talk about when he was a kid and picking up sheep in Arizona and driving them back to Texas, stuff like that. So we're working.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously money is super important, but I'm sure volunteer hours are important because not everybody has the money to give.
Right.
Some people can give their time. So when people volunteer for you, what projects are they going to be working on generally?
Every year we have our annual work project. It was actually last weekend.
Okay.
Historically, the sheep that live down in that Trans-Pecos area, like you were talking about water a while ago, and there's a vast shortage of water in that area, so we build those water guzzlers, and we do that every year. Mm-hmm. That's our work project. There's other things we throw in there on those work projects. People show up. Last weekend, we had 90-something people.
Wow.
We've had as many as 125, 130. And so show up, trailers get there Wednesday night, Thursday morning, go to the staging area, unload, start welding frames together, hooking up tanks, got big steel baskets, putting supplies in those baskets. We try to get all that done by noon on Thursday, and then the helicopter shows up, and we start taking all of that to the tops of the mountains.
Okay.
Big welders take that up there and drop it off, everything. And then Friday morning come in, there's a general safety meeting, and then we start flying volunteers up to each site. Wow. You get off the helicopter and go to work.
See, if you volunteer for you guys, you get to fly in a helicopter at a minimum.
Yeah.
That's always a bonus. Yeah. Not many people get to do that. Yeah. And that's great
and then you're up there, you work all day till it's done, and then they start flying people off and then try to get the equipment off. And this last weekend, we got everything done in Friday in one day. It went really smooth. Yeah, the weather cooperated. The year before, we couldn't do anything on Friday because the wind was too high. We couldn't fly. So we had to finish everything up on Saturday and Sunday. But this year, man, it just went like it went like it was supposed to.
Hey, what's up, everyone? James Appleton here, co-founder of Absolute Aid. Welcome to the Seek to Do More program. This program will help you help yourself by developing the daily habits that will elevate your entire life. Over the next 30 days, you'll complete the doers list every single day. And the doers list includes 1, do something physical. 2, follow and stick to your diet of choice. 3, read a real book. 4, further your education on purpose. 5, dedicate time to your spiritual life. And 6, dedicate time to your hobbies. So if you're ready to take a structured, proven approach to build the daily habits that will allow you to get the most out of yourself, your time, and your life every single day, the Seek to Do More program is your blueprint. So make a choice, commit to yourself, sign up below, and let's get started.
So it is cool coming down to Texas from Ohio because generally, I live right by Lake Erie. Mm-hmm. So the whole... a lot of people from where I'm from can't comprehend the no water thing.
No water, yeah.
So, for instance, put it in perspective, I went fishing with Chester over the last 2 days before we got here yesterday. or in Oklahoma, they got some pretty big water up there. They got reservoirs and they got some big streams and rivers. Get down. We were out fishing in Llano yesterday, and it was like night and day. The rivers are wide, but there's a little stream running through it. But I'm sure sometimes of the year, or years where there's not a drought going on or something, they're raging monstrous rivers. Right. But then we're driving over all these river crossings that are completely dry.
Yeah, with the signs that say 5 feet, all that. Yeah.
And you'll see these signs that are above the road that say flood levels, and that's just not a thing we have where I'm from. So the water issue of Western states doesn't comprehend to a lot of people not from the West. So, I mean, is this a yearly cycle? Are some years just like really good and the sheep have lots of water, and some years are just bust and it's a hard time? Or is it just getting better over time, worse over time? Are you seeing any trends?
Completely variable, like you said. We're in a pretty bad drought right now in our sheep country. Not last year, but the year before, we built 2 guzzlers on the mountains. And about a month later, the monsoons came, and all 4 of those 2,500-gallon tanks were completely full. And they've held through last year and even into this year.
Wow. So if a tank runs dry, do you fill it, or what's the scenario with that?
Just wait for the rain. We haven't, like Nevada and some of those places, that's a big part of their operation is hauling water every year.
Okay.
And they'll helicopter over and just drop water on that apron in the guzzler and let it run down into the tank.
Okay.
Oddly enough, just the condensation on those big metal roofs out in the Trans-Pecos area can provide some water. I mean, it's not like it's going to fill the tank up overnight, but there's always a little bit of something going in there.
So have you yourself ever got to hunt a sheep?
I have.
Yeah?
Yes, sir.
What's that experience like? Because I heard it's a very difficult hunt.
It's peaks and valleys. Not just climbing peaks and valleys, but you get to the point where you're just like, your lungs are about to pop, your legs are exploding. You're like, why in the hell am I up here? What was I thinking? Oh my God, I paid money to do this. Yeah. And then you see one of those animals and it's just like, okay, that's why I'm here.
Yeah. And from what I've understood, sheep have amazing eyesight.
Yes.
And they can see you from a long ways away. So what is a hunt like? I mean, besides the physically straining part, I mean, when you're getting to the animal, what is that like?
A lot of spotting at distance with spotting scopes and big binos, and you find them and then you make a play. Try to get down under cover and walk up, crawl up drainages or come from above from the backside if you can.
What's an average shot you're going to take on a big one, or any sheep? I'm sorry, no, not specific.
I think the shortest one I took was 150, 180, and the longest one was like 5.5.
Wow. We don't shoot that far where I live. I shot a deer once at 30 yards. That's about my experience.
Those shots I was talking about, one was a desert bighorn in Mexico.
Okay.
And so it was in a lot of thick cover, and it just happened to pop up on a rock close to me. And then the further ones are up in the mountains like Alaska or Alberta is where I hunted my Rocky Mountain bighorn.
All right. So is there any, you mentioned Mexico, is there any overlap? I mean, how does it work once they cross the border? Are they no longer getting any support or anything?
They get their passport stamped and then they can go back? No. That's a great question. Those sheep we've done, there's been tons of collaring studies watching migration. Sheep on both sides of the border. Sheep from Texas go to Mexico. Sheep from Mexico come to Texas, and it's just back and forth, back and forth. So you can do all you want to for conservation on one side of the border, but if it's not reciprocated on the other side, then it's kind of a losing battle.
Does Mexico have any plans to do anything about that?
Yes. Actually, there's a Mexico landowner group that was recently started largely on the efforts of Clay Brewer and getting those landowners together, and now they've got plans and protocols and things to do. Another thing that's really brand new is the Texas-Mexico Border Desert Bighorn Sheep Initiative, where our Parks and Wildlife are working with the equivalent on the Mexican side in Coahuila and Chihuahua in those states, just along the border, where we're helping with surveys so they can, that's not an inexpensive proposition with the helicopters, aoudad management, all those kind of things.
So with managing aoudad, how does that work? Because they're not a native species. So is that just kind of an animal that anybody could hunt all year round at any point in time?
It is.
So is there any, this might be a dumb question, but is there any initiative to make it easier for people to hunt aoudads? Or, are you essentially at the will of what the ranch wants to charge?
Like you said, in Texas, it's mostly private land. On the public land and the WMAs, our Parks and Wildlife are really aggressive about culling those aoudad back.
Okay.
Landowners, some of them are the same way. They'll see aoudad or an aoudad will pop up on their camera. They want them gone. On the other end of the spectrum is, one, there's no season because they're a non-native species. Yep. There's no season, there's no tag, there's no quota. You can hunt them year-round as many as you want. So if you look at it from that perspective on some of those landowners, that's anywhere between $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per aoudad. And you can hunt them year-round. We totally understand the economics of that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times that will help. The income from that will help offset losses from other things for some of those landowners.
Yeah.
But the majority of the landowners see it for what it is. And so, they'll sell aoudad hunts and they'll do that. When they're not doing trophy aoudad hunts, they're out there working on those ewes like we talked about.
So, for instance, if I were to come here from Ohio, buy a Texas hunting license, I don't know how your licensing system works really. I could just, if I did find public land, I could just go hunt aoudad.
You'd have to clear that. If it's on a WMA, you'd have to clear that with the state. There's certain, like in Paldera Canyon and in Caprock Canyon State Parks up in the panhandle of Texas, they have aoudad hunts that they allow.
Okay.
And some of the other WMAs you can't.
Okay. So it's just very highly dependent on where you're at.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
But that's all you need is just a valid Texas hunting license. So if you come down and you're going to hunt with an outfitter on private land, you go get your 5-day temporary Texas hunting license and have at it. That's all you need for aoudad.
That's really awesome. That's interesting because a lot of people when they think Texas, they think expensive hunts. But it's possible to hunt public land in Texas. Right. It's just a little more difficult. Right. The public land where I'm at is very crowded in Ohio. Does it get that way down here?
It can.
It can.
Because there's not that much of it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I would
90
assume.
whatever percent of the land in Texas is privately owned.
Yeah.
And so the public lands can get pretty crowded.
That's really interesting.
One of the other hunting options, like I was talking about a while ago with those landowner tags, most of the times they'll sell those to outfitters, then they'll sell them or guide the hunts or whatever, however they set it up on that particular ranch. In the past, I told you that auction tag we have every third year. Mm-hmm. One thing we've tried to do is, man, that'd be nice to have a tag every year. So what we've done is we've reached out to some of our private landowners that are, they're all our partners, and try to buy one of those tags from one of those landowners. And the ones that have done it have given us a deep discount. Yeah. But still cover their costs or whatever. And then we put that in our banquet. On those landowner tags, we do that as a raffle. Okay. And not an auction.
So that anyone is really...
Correct. Anybody can get it. And we do it that way for a couple reasons. One, it really opens up the public hunting opportunities for a desert bighorn sheep. And we're not going to make as much money off a raffle as we would with that auction. But it's like you said, now everybody has a chance. Instead of being 2 or 3 guys in a room that know that they're going to spend big X amount of money, you can spend however much on a ticket and put it in the bucket.
I think that's important. For the average person. But if we're going to be honest, not everybody can afford that big ticket. Right. I know I surely couldn't. Right. And I think having that, I commend you guys for being able to do that, to give the average hunter an opportunity. I mean, it's great, and that's the great thing about America. We all have equal opportunity to hunt, man. Anybody can go hunt at any time they want to. That's a great thing.
And we, when we have those landowner tags like that we put in a raffle, we only sell a certain number of them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think we cap it at 500. So you got a 1 in 500 chance
Even
of going
better.
on a desert bighorn sheep hunt in Texas, which is pretty good.
So with a membership, if they're going to join the Texas Bighorn Society, what do you guys? What's the membership include? Because that's a lot of the organizations that I join. I mean, you usually get a magazine or something, and
Right.
for me that's great. I like reading about what's going on around me.
Right. On our website, we have different levels of membership. You have an individual yearly membership all the way up to life members. You get your little membership packet with a certificate and a name badge. You get our quarterly magazine for as long as you're a member. If you're a life member, you get it forever. If it's yearly, then you have to re-up that every year.
Yeah, I love that. I just love getting those magazines because it's just like very focused issues on the things that I care about immediately.
Right.
So it's great that you put those out. So on a personal level,
and on our website, this new, I say new, it's a couple years old. You can go under the magazine and click, and it has digital copies of all of the past issues.
Great, even
so
better.
If you joined up this year, you can see from years past.
So on a personal level, outside of sheep, what do you like to hunt?
Cats would have to be my
Really?
honest answer, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been to Africa a few times for leopards.
What's that like?
It's crazy. It's just like fun.
That's the big
Because you don't know if you're hunting or you're being hunted sometimes. Because
I could see that being a huge draw. What's the African hunting like? Because it's like Texas and Africa have this weird connection. Like there's like the safari clubs and things of that nature.
Yeah, and like the Aoudads, they came from Africa originally. Now they're threatened in their native original homeland, whereas over here they're a problem.
It's weird how that works out sometimes.
Yeah, that's the way it is with a lot of the African animals that have been brought to Texas and put on some of these exotic game ranches. They're just flourishing. And
Well, they have. Doesn't Texas have a very similar, kind of ecosystem to Africa?
a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah. I always say coming over here to Texas is sometimes going like to a zoo. You're just like, where are all these? I don't even know what these animals are. I sit on a ranch and I'll be like, I have no idea what this is. So that's really cool. But in an Africa hunt, how does that go? I mean, I'm more like on the level of like logistically, you have to get over there and you go through an outfitter,
Right.
I'm assuming, and all this stuff. Most people probably don't go to Africa and do self-guided hunts, if that's even an option.
It's not an option.
It's not an option. So are they kind of, have they taken any keys from us on the North American model of conservation, or do they have their own model over there?
A little bit of both. They've got, they do some of the North American model as well. They know that hunters are what fund most of their anti-poaching and all those other things they have. Some of the plains game, it's a little different model. Once those animals were monetized, now they're protected or regulated, or people are a little more careful about it.
Do you have any insight on the poaching thing over there? Because I mean, people poach here in the United States, obviously.
Not like it is over there.
Yeah. So what's that?
The biggest problem over there is two things: main sustenance poaching, so people just poaching to live, and then the other one is like elephants and rhinos in the ivory trade. Those are the two big ones.
That's really sad when you hear about that. That's just, I personally, just for the way I am, I couldn't comprehend that. But I mean, I have to imagine it's hard over there for people who don't have any money. That's like big opportunity to make some cash, whether it's legal or not.
Yeah.
They have like full armies dedicated to anti-poaching, don't they? Over there, it's like it's not. I think we get a little complacent over here in the States because we don't have to deal with stuff like that. And over that's like a literal battleground of things.
It is.
Conservation.
That's like ground zero for anti-poaching.
Yeah. I mean, that's like conservation through firepower.
Right.
It really is.
Yeah.
Have you had to deal with any of that, or has it been relatively safe while you
Every time I've been over there, I haven't had any problem with any of it.
Okay. Well, that's really good. Where do you...
The worst poaching issue that I had, or that I was exposed to, was deforestation, and they're chopping down trees to make whatever, and then fish poachers.
Fish poachers.
Having gill nets out in the rivers and just really taking them out of there.
Probably quite a bit of that goes on over here too.
Yeah, probably.
I would think so. But so, what was it like hunting a big cat? I mean, what's it like? What's the experience like? Like similar to the Aoudads, like you're the sheep hunting over here. Is it just a different world? How does it go?
It is. The cats are one of my favorites because you're not just finding a herd of animals and that's the one and doing it. There's a lot of strategy involved. It takes a lot of time, a lot of patience.
What time are we talking? Like days, weeks?
Days to week, depending on which area you're in.
Wow. Because I think people have this perception of hunting like that as they just drop you somewhere, you get out of the car and go boom, and then you take off.
No.
It's not like that?
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you looking at maps a lot? Are you on the ground a lot?
On the ground.
On the ground.
Yeah.
Searching for sign?
Looking for sign. Like if you're like on a leopard hunt, you're looking for sign down in the creek bottoms, anywhere, looking at sand, anywhere there may be tracks. You find a track,
follow it
a little ways, and said, okay, then you can set up baits in those areas because those cats work big ranges.
Like what's a range for a cat, you think?
200 miles.
Oh, I thought you were going to say like 20.
No.
200?
Yeah, they'll make big, huge loops, but there's a lot of cats.
Wow.
But usually one dominant male in that big loop. In some of those countries, it may be smaller than others, but...
Where specifically were you? Like what part of Africa?
I hunted in Namibia,
okay,
Zambia, and in Mozambique for leopard.
That's got to be hot.
That's pretty crazy.
You're in Texas, so it's usually pretty warm here, but
yeah,
that's got to be.
It wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad.
No.
Were you going where were you in the middle of the year, like summer, winter?
Seasons are opposite.
Below the equator.
So over there, like at Christmas over there in December, there are people at the beach. That's their Christmas vacation is going to the beach.
Okay.
And then during the summer months here is when it's winter over there.
What do they consider winter? Like 40 degrees?
No, there are places where it snows.
Really? Mm-hmm. I guess in northern Africa that would make sense.
But even in South Africa, in some of the mountainous areas like in the Karoo and places like that, in the higher mountains, they'll get some snow there every so often.
Never would have thought about that in my lifetime. That's super cool.
Yeah. Snow in Africa in July. It's kind of weird.
That is really weird.
Yeah.
What's the coolest experience you had ever, hunting or fishing? I mean, the Jaguar we talked about, that's pretty cool. But I mean, let's keep it in the States. Got any cool hunting stories that really was man, this was great? Could have been from you were a kid, I don't care, whenever.
It would probably have been my stone sheep hunt.
Stone sheep.
Because that was a 14-day hunt, and it finished right at sundown of the 14th day.
That'll get your heart rate up.
A lot of horseback miles, a lot of hiking, more horseback miles, more hiking, more climbing, back down, and then kind of had called it. The sun was starting to go down. It's like, all right, well, let's go. And as we're walking off the mountain, that's when we found our little band of rams. Ended up being successful. So patience paid off, I guess.
That's got to be a good feeling. I mean, that's typical. That's a typical hunting experience. I think a lot of people that don't hunt think it's an easy thing.
Right.
It's not. It's never easy. Yeah. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is.
I've never been on one of those trips.
Me neither. I'll be honest. Most of my hunts have been deadline down to the minute. I better make this happen now. Do you have any advice for people who maybe want to get into hunting, but they're always nervous about it?
Do it.
That's good advice.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah, because a lot of people, it's like anything. You just get overwhelmed when you start looking into it. My advice is always go buy a shotgun. Yeah. And a cheap pair of camo and decide if you like it or not.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you can do anything with a shotgun, really.
Yeah.
Any of the basics of hunting.
Birds, rabbits, squirrels, whatever.
Squirrels, deer, even.
Yeah.
You can have a good time with a shotgun.
That's right.
What's your favorite gun? Everyone's got one.
My favorite gun would be my Gunworks 28 Nosler.
What the hell is that?
It's a rifle made by Gunworks, is the company, and the caliber is a 28 Nosler.
Wow. Is it just like a machine? Why do you like it so much? Everybody's got their favorite gun.
Because I know where that bullet's going every time.
The accuracy.
Yeah, it's crazy precise.
Have you ever found my brother is big into guns. I mean, I'm a practical gun user. I like to use them to hunt. But my brother is a big time into guns.
That's like a woman saying I only need one pair of shoes.
Yeah, it's a lie. He buys a lot of nice guns and he has a lot of cheap guns. Like he'll just buy a gun and be like, "That's a cool gun. I'm gonna get that." It doesn't matter. And he said, sometimes he finds that some of the guns that you would think were just cheap pieces of crap are the most. He just loves them to death.
Yeah,
and he'll be like, "I have this expensive gun. I can't get it to shoot anything."
That's right.
Yeah. What's a good entry? So this is a question I have. I've never hunted out west. I want to. What's a good gun that's like an entry level? Someone just could afford easily. That's like a reliable, good gun, good caliber for hunting anything from, sheep to elk to deer to anything that you're shooting distance, antelope.
Kind of historically, the answer to that was either a 270 or a 30-06.
30-06 is what a lot of people say.
And those are, those. There's newer cartridges, good entry level. Obviously, 7mm. You can do anything with that.
Yeah.
There's some of these newer cartridges, the 6.5 PRCs, and some of those things they've got crazy ballistics, so you can do whatever with it you want to.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. I want to thank you, for the work you're doing. It's really important, I think, to have organizations like yours out there because you're just you're fighting for the little guy. The sheep can't defend themselves. They're really having a hard time and raising awareness about this issue. It's really important work. So I want to thank you for that. And if you can, just let people know where they can learn more about you guys. I would encourage you to join. Sheep need help.
Sure. On our website, TexasBighornSociety.org.
Okay. And join your memberships, get involved.
Exactly.
Especially if you
get
live
on
down
the mailing list.
Even if you don't, even if you live in Ohio, you can still join.
That's right. We have this new program a relatively new program called Adopt a Guzzler. So we have all these water catchment devices on tops of all these mountains. How do you maintain those? And so to get more people involved, younger people involved, you can adopt a guzzler. You say, "Hey, I want to do this." You get a group of 4 or 5 friends, put a team together. We'll give you the coordinates of a water guzzler, and then whenever you want to, it doesn't have to be on any certain weekend. You get your stuff, you organize your guys, and go up and check out the guzzler and see what's working, what needs to be fixed, and then make simple repairs while you're there. Otherwise, take pictures with your phone, write notes, then bring it back, and then if it's something big we need to fly up, then the next time we're in the area with the helicopter, we'll drop stuff off.
That's great. That sounds like a great program.
Yeah.
You get a good excuse to just go out in the backcountry and hang out.
Yeah.
All right. Well, take it easy. Thanks for coming out here. I've learned a lot today. I hope listeners have learned a lot. So thanks for what you do.
Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.